The other thing that really surprises me about people trying to get pregnant is two things. The lack of sex they're having.
Okay.
And when they're having sex.
Yep. Okay.
So quite a lot of the time I'm getting chats with no intercourse. And I'm like, oh, you can't get pregnant without sex. So that's important.
Yeah, that's a part of it.
Yeah.
In case you didn't know, kids at home. Hi, welcome to the Chinese Medicine Podcast. I'm Marie Hopkinson. I'm a Chinese medicine practitioner, and today I'm joined by Camilla Cameron, also a Chinese medicine practitioner and acupuncturist in Paddington, Queensland. And today we're going to be talking about the 10 steps to help you improve your fertility. So Camilla's got a wealth of knowledge. She's been treating patients for 19 plus years.
Yeah.
And she has got some really interesting stuff to talk about and to help people that are maybe either on a fertility journey, looking to start that, interested to know. We're going to talk about basal body temperature, how to read the basal body temperature chart. So if that's something new to you, how to understand your cycle, how to understand the possibility of maybe getting pregnant even with a cycle that isn't what would maybe be considered a regular cycle or a normal cycle, let's say. And so how she interprets that, how she utilises the intermingling or the interconnectedness of Western medicine and the research that's out there, and integrates that into her practice with acupuncture and Chinese medicine. So welcome today, Camilla.
Thanks for having me, Marie.
Awesome. Camilla is going to be talking today on the topic of fertility and maybe some questions that you might be thinking about if you're going to go down the road of using Chinese medicine or acupuncture specifically. So Camilla does a few things. You do the vagus nerve testing as well, vagus nerve stimulation.
Vagus nerve stimulation, yeah. Okay. So auricular vagus nerve stimulation.
Yep. And she also does acupuncture, and she's been practicing for a long time. She graduated in
2001. Yeah.
So she's got more than 19 years, or just on 19 years experience. Yes. And so it's a privilege to have you here today and talk about some of your experience with fertility and acupuncture, and hopefully we can help some patients and people out there that are looking for ideas and ways that they can help themselves if they're on that journey of wanting to get pregnant.
Yeah, sounds good.
Awesome. So maybe tell us a little bit about the vagus nerve stimulation. Do you use that in the fertility or just in other areas?
Yes, so I basically use vagus nerve stimulation on anyone that I feel it's appropriate, which probably ends up being about 99% of my patients. Okay. And pretty much most fertility patients will get it as well. So the vagus nerve, really briefly, goes from the base of the spine to every organ in the body. And so by improving the vagus nerve tone, you improve all the functions of the organs within the body. So they really complement each other, the two treatments, and it's kind of like increases the effect of the acupuncture, and the acupuncture increases the effect of the vagus nerve stimulation, I find, in my treatments.
Yeah. Because vagus nerve stimulation isn't really part of Chinese medicine. It's something extra that you've done, right?
Yeah, it's completely different.
Yeah, but lots of practitioners do it.
It's really hard to find someone in Queensland.
Okay.
I don't know about anywhere else, but I'm the only acupuncturist in Queensland, or there might be another one now who does vagus nerve stimulation.
It's probably a bit more popular in Perth then.
Right,
I've seen it around.
Well, there you go. Yeah, so it's quite new, at least as far as I know, in Queensland. It's only been around for a couple of years that people use the auricular therapy stimulation.
Okay. And what's its purpose? What would you generally use it for?
By stimulating the vagus nerve through the ear, so there are basically parts of the ear that then stimulate the vagus nerve directly. So by doing that, yes, it calms you and relaxes you, and helps with, focusing on deep breathing and all that sort of thing. Right. Yeah.
So it helps regulate people's nervous system?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Regulates nervous system and regulates cardiac output and things like that.
Okay, right. And so you use it on patients on an individualised basis, depending on what you see is the imbalance there, and you work with that.
Yeah, so you choose settings based on what you want to treat, essentially.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. Right, well that's something that you can find out more about. We'll put the link in the description below for Camilla's practice and her these things, so you can find out more on her website and stuff like that about that. Okay, so let's talk about fertility, right? So this is a big topic, and there are lots of practitioners in Chinese medicine that would approach it in different ways. So I want to know the way you would approach it. So if a patient came to see you and said, I'm looking at having a baby, or I want to have a baby, what would be the next steps? What would you sort of be talking to them about?
That's a really big, broad question. So obviously they'd always fill in a very in-depth form first off, so get a pretty good idea of where their fertility is at.
Yep.
Most people I treat have been on a pretty long journey with fertility. I sometimes get people who are just coming in to get ready for a baby, but that's pretty uncommon.
Yep.
My most common patient is, I've been trying for 3 years. I may have tried IVF. I don't want to try IVF anymore. I'm definitely doing IVF, and I just need to help me in that process. And so then from there, it's working out with them what needs to change in diet and lifestyle, and what can I find by palpating that needs to change, and how do we go about doing that?
Yeah, all right. And one of the things that you do as well is Japanese acupuncture, right? So tell us a little bit about how that works in with fertility. Like, what's the difference between that and the stock standard
Chinese acupuncture? So the main differences that I like to tell people about is probably the thickness of the needle. So the needle in Japanese acupuncture is quite thin comparatively, and the depth of insertion is much shallower generally.
Right.
And so basically the aim is to not feel the treatment very much.
Okay. So that's good news for people that are maybe a little bit scared.
Yeah.
Or worried about a giant needle, and they think...
Yes.
Not that Chinese medicine uses giant needles,
exactly.
but it's even smaller than... So if you've had acupuncture with a standard acupuncturist, you're probably going to get a different experience with a Japanese acupuncturist, right?
Yeah, that's right. There's certainly less stimulation of qi, for example, which is, that sensation that Chinese acupuncturists usually like you to feel. Okay,
right. So that's that tingly, numbness, heaviness, achy, And one thing I noticed when I went to China is that native Chinese love that feeling.
Right,
and so they're taught to, like, they just love it, especially for pain. They think it's helping them. The more they feel it, the more they think it's a better treatment. So there's this association between, stronger treatment. And that's kind of like not the case in the Japanese traditions, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more about the concept that if you're... Tell it gently what to do.
Right, so with the Japanese, it's much more gentler, and as the body adjusts, then you're responding to that.
Like, my understanding is that we're kind of pressing points in the body, telling it what to do, and then the body knows what to do by you doing that.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
All right. And so you're going to talk a little bit about when a patient comes in for fertility, what are some of the things you help them understand, which may be Chinese medicine based, or they may just be medicine based in general, like health based and understanding. What are some of those things that you talk to people?
Also, there's lots of things we talk about. There's lots of various avenues we need to go down. So one is diet, lifestyle, and then I'm really big on doing a Basal Body Temperature chart. So getting them to take that and then essentially show me their chart every week. So then from that chart we work out what we need to change. And then I'm really into medical investigations. So blood tests, ultrasounds, HSG test, sperm tests. So basically getting as much information as we possibly can get, so then we can work on holistically changing the body.
Right. And so what does that tell you? Because like back in the Han Dynasty, at the roots of Chinese medicine, they never had any sperm tests and HCG tests and all this. So how have you kind of, like, have you done further training to kind of interpret those in a Chinese medicine way, or is it a particular style that you approach with that?
More interpret them from a Western medicine perspective. And yes, I've had some additional training, and some of it's kind of self-taught as well, or working with other practitioners who are really experienced as well. But yeah, because I guess you're doing the same sort of treatment over and over in terms of seeing the same results all the time, you know what you need to be achieving. So a lot of it's just experience, I guess. Camilla,
you talked about the basal body temperature chart, and there's some women that are probably like super duper familiar with that, and they know, I know exactly what that is. What about people that have no idea? Can you step us through what that means?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, a basal body temperature chart is you taking your temperature every morning at the same time, or at least every morning when you wake up and haven't moved. So that's quite an important part of it, is that you've literally grabbed the thermometer and taking your temperature straight away. And then you just record that in your phone. And I generally tell people, just use Fertility Friend. You don't need to think about it afterwards. Just put it in there and leave it, and I'll do all the hard work for you.
Yeah. So that's an app that they get, and they use that.
Yeah,
and they take their temperature in a normal place or in a certain place?
Usually in your mouth.
Yep.
Some people do it vaginally as well. Which
that's why I was asking.
Doing.
So I was just wondering what you...
and generally you do that if you're a mouth breather, because being a mouth breather changes your temperature in your mouth.
Right.
Yeah, so it takes a while to get women to want to do that, but eventually they realise it's much more reliable.
Okay, right.
Yes,
okay.
But I don't always... I'm
don't
not
use
enforcing
the
that
same
necessarily.
Thermometer. Don't use the family thermometer. Get your own special one. Okay, so you've got this this example for us to show us with these patients, right? Or
so this is the first patient, and when she first came to me, she had been trying for a few months and she had been diagnosed with pretty severe PCOS in her teenage years. Her cycles could go up to 100 days.
Okay.
This cycle was a pretty good one. This was after a couple of months and she'd gone down to 45 days, so that was a good sign. All of her charts previous to this, she had not shown ovulation signs at all with her temperature.
Yep.
So this is her first chart where she actually shows ovulation, and that's on day 30.
So what are you looking for with the ovulation? How would someone know?
So basically at the beginning of your cycle, it should be fairly stable. If it's like this the whole time, it means you're really stressed and your sleep is bad normally.
Okay.
Once you've ovulated, your temperature for most people will drop and then it will go up. And then it should stay up above what it was at the beginning of the phase, which is your follicular phase, and that's your luteal phase.
Right. So they're looking for a drop and then a spike that goes up beyond what it previously was.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't always drop. Some people just get a rise that then stays up there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, by looking at her chart, I could say, well, we need to shorten your cycle. 45 days is still too long. I like to do between 28 and 35, saying that's pretty good. And so we did some treatment based around that, some supplementation, some dietary stuff.
And the treatment that you give people is all based on that individualised approach, right?
Absolutely.
So whatever we use pulse and tongue diagnosis and
pulse and abdomen are my two main.
Yep.
And also some palpation of specific hormonal points and that sort of thing.
Okay, awesome.
And then obviously, yes, using the temperature as a real gauge as well. So her next cycle, she came in and we worked on things and she managed to get down to a 35-day cycle. So exactly perfect. I'm fine with 35 days. Really clear ovulation and a good length of cycle after ovulation as well.
Yeah.
So that was a really good change. And then that same patient, the next cycle, she got pregnant.
Right. Wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah. So that was pretty good result.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a good example. Like, we're just using this as a case example to show you, one, how to read those basal body temperature charts.
Yeah.
And secondly, like how Chinese medicine or treatment how a Chinese medicine practitioner would utilize that information to interpret how is the treatment working. Because let's say you go through to the treatment, you do 3 months of acupuncture and herbs or whatever, supplements or diet, you change all this stuff. You don't have a baby, you don't have anything to base off whether it's working or not.
Exactly.
Like, is it changing me? Is it helping me?
Yeah.
So it's really good that you get this information.
Yeah.
Patients can then see that themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Are things working? I mean, the number of days of a cycle would be the biggest one that people would notice for as well. Like, if they're having a 100-day cycle and then they go to a 45-day cycle, that's obviously you're gonna notice that. Hopefully.
Yes. Yeah, so it's very tangible, but then this obviously gives you, for some people, they may come to me with a 28-day cycle, so they think everything's going really well. And you can see, you've got a 28-day cycle, but you're not ovulating. So it's all about making sure you're actually ovulating, because obviously if you're not ovulating, you can't get pregnant.
Okay. And so this is probably a way that it's less invasive and also probably less expensive than going and having blood tests and going down that fertility road at that point, right? Fertility test
correct.
road. And if this showed something abnormal, would you then send them to Western medicine to have those ovulation tests?
To be honest, I like people to get blood tests as the first port of call as well. So I like to assess that. I really love it if you've had an ultrasound or you're having one soon, because there are things you can miss if you just keep treating people, and I like to be very on top of things to make sure we're going down the right track.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And what kind of ultrasound, or how would the patients go about getting that?
So generally you need a transvaginal ultrasound to start with, and that's through your GP. You'd get a referral, then you go along. Usually you'd go post-ovulation so they can make sure you've ovulated, see how thick your lining is, and then at the same time check your ovaries.
Okay, right.
And that sort of thing.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So they can check all that with that
Yeah,
scan.
so it's really easy.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Right, good. Yeah, good. And so, you've got another case to show us?
Oh, yeah. So then we've got the second case. So this patient had a really long gynecological history. Also had, in that time, had an ectopic pregnancy. So she'd been trying for about 3 years when she came to me. And had essentially been told after the ectopic pregnancy, you just need to do IVF.
Okay.
She was pretty anti-IVF, which I'm not, but she was. So she came to me with a 46-day cycle, but it could be much longer at times. And for a couple of months, she showed no sign of ovulation at all. She was a really long case. We did have to do a lot of changes to her diet, her lifestyle in particular. So lots of things changed about her body in that process that she was very much in charge of. which was
What kind
great.
of diet and lifestyle stuff do you give people? Like, what are some key things that just common things that would make common sense for people watching this that are okay, maybe I shouldn't have 10 coffees a day?
Yes. So basically, lots of practitioners say 0 coffees a day. I say have 1 and make it 1 shot. And if you really want a coffee, if you're happy not to have a coffee, then that's great.
Don't start coffee.
Don't start coffee, no. But because I really believe that the process of getting pregnant shouldn't be this real deprivation, which is what lots of people kind of end up doing, this really depressing deprivation, and then it's depressing in itself, the whole process. So trying to bring it back and be like, this needs to be enjoyable. So 1 coffee a day maximum, 3 standard drinks a week maximum.
Okay, right.
And that's for both partners, both of those rules. And then very much a whole food diet. So lots of fruit and veggies, a little bit of meat, but kind of common sense and not much packaging, and a real reduction in people's sugar intake.
That's I mean, that is just the common sense general Chinese diet. We've done heaps of videos on this channel about that. And it's the packet food that's the devil. Like, it is. Packets have got so many preservatives and bits and pieces in them that and it's not, you're possibly ingesting toxins that might affect your baby as well if you were to get pregnant, right? And I think the thing that people don't realise, particularly with sauces, pasta sauces, stir fry sauces, the level of sugar is out of control in most of those. Crazy.
So it's really important to read labels.
I went on the paleo diet for a while, and the one thing I found was, because with paleo you don't eat sugar and you don't eat grains, and so you pretty much then by default you don't eat processed. Because you go, like, I would literally go to Coles and I could probably shop in 2 aisles, the fruit and veggie section, and you don't have dairy either. And it's like, doing something like that, like, I don't expect my patients to do these extreme diets, but it can be good from time to time because it highlights all this stuff that you just shove in your mouth without thinking, that mindlessness. So I mean, that's a really good point about people go into this journey of wanting to get pregnant, and like you said, it should be enjoyable. It should be a lifestyle thing that they enjoy, not an arduous, I've got to endure this and then endure the baby and endure everything. And there are all these side benefits that patients get, right?
Absolutely. You feel completely different and like so much healthier. And the other thing that I really advocate is you must exercise. And that's, I mean, I advocate that for everyone.
How much exercise though?
About 4 to 5, 6 times a week, 45 minutes. And not really super intense. But certainly intense enough that you're, able to breathe and kind of have a conversation, but not so intense that you can't speak at all.
Not CrossFit, right? Like
not CrossFit.
Massively sweating and
not running. They're my 2 that I kind of go, most people aren't going to get pregnant doing those. And some people I've had come in who want to continue marathon training and get pregnant, and I kind of say to them, you need to choose. It's, and if you really want to do marathons, maybe you can't get pregnant right now, so it is sometimes it is a real decision for people to change those things.
Okay, cool. All right. Sorry to sidetrack you there. That's good. A good sidetrack. What about you? So this patient example, this case study example.
So she had the 46-day cycle and then no ovulation. Within a few charts, that had changed to 34 days as a general rule, and ovulation around about the 20-day mark. So that's pretty good. And she actually got pregnant on one of those cycles. So it's 34 days, ovulation at 20 days, and then was pregnant. Cycle day 19 it says there. And I think that's another thing I like to highlight to people is you don't actually need a perfect cycle. So I find that some practitioners get quite obsessed with it must be 28 days, you must ovulate at day 14. And I have to say that most of my patients don't get to that type of cycle and get pregnant. And so I'm always a bit like, let's try and get to 28 or between 28 and 35. If you do that, we've done really well. That's a good thing to know, because I think also for maybe some students watching this, or maybe even practitioners, like, it is drilled into you when you study Chinese medicine that a normal Chinese medicine cycle is 28 days, and maybe a day or 2 over that is normal. But what you've said makes a lot of sense, because although you do have to have, like, you can't say a 100-day cycle, it's because that person's always had it, it's normal for them, therefore it's normal. So there has to be some parameters there. But if they have these markers that you can see they're ovulating and then also, I guess the test is that if these kinds of patients are able to get pregnant, then that shows that their body's healthily able to get that's right
pregnant.
And look, I do get the concept that a 28-day cycle is probably better because that's kind of like the lunar cycle and it's following nature more. But unfortunately, we don't really live like that anymore, so we don't always manage to get to that point.
Do you think that affects women that travel a lot? Like, that discombobulation? Like, if you're traveling, I don't know, global travel and things like that?
Yeah, I don't think it helps getting pregnant if you're traveling a lot. Yeah.
Like, does that, do you notice that disrupts cycles is what I'm saying, the regularity?
I don't actually get a lot of women that travel internationally a lot, I have to say, for like that I can monitor that so well.
They're probably too busy being at home with their partners or around the around the sperm so they can get it. Don't go too far from home.
That's right.
Fair enough. Okay, awesome. Oh, those are really good tips. So do you have resource on your website or something where patients can get this information about the basal temperature chart? Or
I actually haven't added that in, but I will. I will put that as a blog on there.
She will now.
Yes.
Yeah, but you can jump onto Camilla's website and have a look at because you have a blog there.
Yeah.
About fertility and different
lots
things.
Of things about fertility.
About Chinese medicine and that journey that people go on and what's, to kind of support you and give you resource along the way. Awesome. Okay, good. So those are some really good ways that people can get knowledgeable about their cycle, I think, and start to learn about it and get into it. I'm surprised sometimes in my practice, like maybe they're not patients that want to get pregnant, but the amount of patients I have that like don't know when their cycle is, they have like a surprise period every time month. And I'm like, you just live like that? Like they wouldn't know, like they're scrambling around to try to remember when they had a period last so they could and so if you're not trying to get pregnant, you don't need to track your basal body temperature, although it could still give you information about your
hormones,
the health of your body. And like if you are thinking about having a baby in 1 year, in 2 years, this is a time to maybe prepare yourself now, see a practitioner now, because some of these things take time.
Absolutely. And it's a lot less stressful if you're doing it before you're feeling the pressure to get pregnant. And you've got everything lined up in a row, then it's usually a lot easier to get pregnant.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so what are some other things you tell your patients or general advice you give to people that are going down this road?
And like you said, it's surprising some people don't know when they're about to get their period every month, which sometimes I can be a bit like that myself. But the other thing that really surprises me about people trying to get pregnant is two things: the lack of sex they're having, and when they're having sex.
Yep. Okay.
So quite a lot of the time I'm getting charts with no intercourse, and I'm like, you can't get pregnant without sex. So that's important.
Yeah, that's a part of it. Yeah. Just in case you didn't know, kids at home.
And the other thing is a lot of people, probably more than 50% of people, actually think they need to have sex after ovulation.
Okay.
When it's actually before.
Right. And why is that?
Because basically, once the egg's released, you've got about 12 to 24 hours where it's alive. And in that time, the sperm must have gone into the uterus to meet. And it can take up to 5 days to get there.
Right.
So you've got 5 days before ovulation to ovulation that you're the most fertile, essentially.
Okay.
And so you need to be having sex in that time. That's really important.
Yep. So this is why if you're tracking your charts, it's not like, oh, I've ovulated, now let's go.
That's right.
You kind of know I'm going to ovulate because I did it the same as last time, and you can start preparing and getting ready.
Yeah, and that's probably the failing of the chart. Is it's going to tell you after you've ovulated. So you get used to knowing. And also your symptoms. Like, I've got mucus and I've got a bit of pain and, that's me ovulating, because you can match that to your last chart.
Right.
So it's all about getting really aware about what your body does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay. So remember that. And so what other things do you tell people?
So one really important thing that I say for anyone trying to improve their health is think about your sleep. So in that 19 years that I've been treating, the difference between the sleep people get now and the sleep they were getting 19 years ago is quite enormous. There's this real kind of lack of awareness that sleep is really important, that work is probably not your number one priority at 9 o'clock at night, that you should probably actually be going to bed. So most adults require between 7 and 9 hours sleep. And if you're not getting that sleep, your cells won't rejuvenate. Therefore, your eggs inside of your ovaries aren't the quality they could be. And so it's all about making sure you prioritize that. Also, your sleep being really important before 12 o'clock at night. They say that sleep before 12 o'clock is actually so much better quality than after. So
and that lines up with Chinese medicine, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
The time clocks and the Chinese medicine has this idea of like different organs are active at different times, it's important that what you do it with sleep in a Chinese medicine sense is you're replenishing blood, right?
Yes.
So if you don't replenish blood, that's a massive issue in wanting to get pregnant, because you might not have a good fertile uterus lining.
Yeah, that's right.
That's part of it. Yeah.
And also then you're not necessarily getting the blood to the ovaries, so then the quality of the eggs is not as good. And so sleep is probably, for all health issues, I'd say my number one is you must look at your sleep. Yeah.
And I think some of the things of 19 years ago versus now, you didn't have iPhones and phones and Android phones and everything, and devices and bright lights keeping you up and emails ding-donging and people messaging you at all times of night.
Yes.
That's a big one, and that light is, disrupts your production of melatonin.
Yes, exactly. It's essentially, anytime you're on your phone, you're teaching your brain it should be awake.
Yeah.
So yes, I would say to people it's really important, if you're not getting good sleep, that you actually need to say, I'm not on my phone after 7, or whatever boundary you want to put on yourself. And the other thing I talk about a lot is putting your phone on airplane mode when you go to sleep, so that you're not getting messages, but also so you're not getting that Wi-Fi signal next to your head trying to search for Wi-Fi the whole time.
Yeah, right, searching for Wi-Fi.
Yeah, through your brain.
Yeah. Google's reading my mind. I woke up and I had Uber Eats at my doorstep, so I thought about it in my sleep. Yeah, well, it's I think we don't realise, because, even I just bought a new iPhone and you can't turn it off.
What do you mean?
It doesn't turn off. Like, you don't know if it's turned off.
Oh.
Like, you can turn it off, but you don't, there's no off switch.
Oh.
Like an actual button that physically turns it off.
Right.
So do you know what I'm saying? Like, you know how you say, Siri, turn my phone off, or you you hold the thing down, you slide it off. But is it really turned off? That kind of thing. Like, is it really still picking up signals, and is it still churning away in the background, right? Collecting the data on you or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, but these are things where I think we've become so used to the technology that it provides, right? So your phone is your alarm clock, it's all this stuff, and so then we don't turn it off because I need it for my alarm clock, or I need it for this, or I need it for that, and it's like, you just go and buy an alarm clock.
Yeah, and that is something sometimes what I say to people is, people who really just can't resist it, you need to put it in a different room and get an alarm clock like we used to have. Yeah.
Keep the Wi-Fi out of the bedroom if you can. That's a really good thing. Okay. So your sleep is important, and you're going to benefit even if you're not, if you're the partner and you're not the person who's going to be carrying the baby. That's a good thing to help both sides, if they can both do that and both have screen time down. And a really dark room helps as well, like a blackout room. And I recently saw this research about the sounds of the alarm, and that's something that my teacher always talks about. That it shocks your heart when you wake up to like you're sound asleep and you're fully especially people that have to wake up. In a perfect world, you should just wake up when you naturally wake up, and that's nice, and I can do that sometimes because I'm lucky that I don't have to wake up at a certain time sometimes. But I know patients have to wake up for work at a certain time, and then they're you're startled awake. That makes a big difference. So it shocks your Shen in Chinese medicine. It startles you awake. And so I'll see if I can find the link to the study, and I'll put it below, because they were going through the 5 top songs that were found in this research to be the most calming songs to wake you up to. But there's also this little alarm thing you can buy, which goes in the corner of your room, and when it's waking up time, it just gradually fades this light. So let's say you go to bed in a pitch dark room and you have blackout curtains. So it'd be great if the morning sun would wake you up when you should wake up. But if you're the kind of person that, let's say for lifestyle reasons, you are going to bed a bit late, and then but then if the morning sun comes in at 5 a.m. and you don't want to be waking up at 5 a.m, so you have this light thing that goes, and it starts to have bird tweets and slow sounds, and so a little bit of ambient noise rather than so it's basically a 30-minute alarm cycle to get you up at the time you want to get up, rather than being like boom. You go and you're like, what? So that's something to think about. There are those devices out there that can help you do that nicely. Yep.
And my alarm is actually a nature sound, so it kind of similar to that, but it's much quicker. It's probably over 5 minutes it starts to get louder.
That's a great idea.
But I do notice that that's so much more calming than that horrible sound that you then actually kind of associate with really terrible thoughts every time you hear that sound as well. Oh, for sure. Yeah, it shocks you. Yeah. Yeah, and it agitates you, so don't do that. Or they're just the ding dings, and that can be, if you're annoyed by messages, and you think, oh no, not another email, not another message. My little trick is I change the sounds all the time, so that
you don't get
you
don't get sensitized into this sound every time you hear whoosh. You're like, oh no, stress, like there's a bills to pay or something like that. Anyway, that's for free. We'll stop going on this sidebar. But so sleep is super important. So what are the other things that are important with fertility? If you're trying to have better health for fertility.
Like we discussed before, talking about investigating, and we've kind of gone over that a little bit, so I'll just go into it very briefly, but probably the main one is blood tests, and that's going into various different aspects of hormones, general health, etc. And that's for men and women. And then getting your sperm tested is really super important because we are pretty much in an epidemic of poor sperm health in the modern world. And so, which is something that people don't seem to recognise and is not really acknowledged. And the great thing about sperm health, generally it's really easy to fix. I mean, obviously there's some conditions that's not actually true, but that's pretty rare.
Okay.
Most of the time it's lifestyle, diet and supplements and you're done. Much easier than women. And it's hard to get a man to do it for some reason, but once they've done it,
they don't want to know.
It's kind of indicative of their manliness, which is really not true. And then the next one is the HSG, which has a really long name that I've never been able to pronounce. But essentially that is putting a saline dye or an oil dye up your uterus through your fallopian tubes to see if they're blocked or not. This in itself can unblock your tubes, and it does, in some studies, has been reported to improve fertility by about 40% afterwards for a little bit.
Okay, just from having the test?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So it's a really good one to have, and the thing is, if you have blocked fallopian tubes, you cannot get pregnant.
Yeah, because the egg can't get down there.
Yeah, that's right.
And then if it does get halfway and it gets fertilised there, you'll have an ectopic pregnancy. That'll be worse.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a really important test in my opinion, and I usually say within 6 months, if you're not pregnant, that should be something that you go down and have a look at. And then the next one, which is much more invasive than any of these, is to have a laparoscopy. If you are showing symptoms of endometriosis, or you are not getting pregnant after everything's in a line and still nothing's happening, then it may be an option for you to go down, because endometriosis can, not always, but it can stop you getting pregnant, just because of the hormone imbalance that it often occurs because of it. But it is an invasive procedure, so it's not something you do lightheartedly.
Yeah, it'd be the last of these three that you've mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So people would start with these, you could start now doing the Basal Body Temperature chart. You could then go and see your GP, and if you're in Australia, a lot of these tests you can get done through Medicare, so it's under the PBS Public Benefit Scheme, the Medicare scheme. And if you're in your wherever you are, if you go to your general practitioner first, they should be able to direct you the most economical way to get the tests done, because it's covered under most
of it is
medical health schemes.
Things like your AMH, which is essentially measures how many eggs you've got left. I mean, that's quite controversial as to whether that actually is accurate or not. Is not free. And in Queensland, you have to go to a fertility specialist for a referral for that. So there are some tests that people like to get that you have to go a bit further, and it's a bit more expensive to get done.
But these would give you an idea. So, like if you had the blocked tubes, then that's an obvious thing. You start working on that.
Absolutely.
And so, it's a good idea, and I think it's also there. I see patients, I'm sure you do too, that just they come to you because they want natural, and that's all. It's good. It's great to be natural, but we also have this modern technology. It's awesome if we can take advantage of it. And there are some things that they're not too invasive and destructive to your body actually having the test, and so it's worth it to know that, and it saves you a lot of time and money down the track banging away at something if there was a fix that you could have known about earlier on,
exactly. Right? And things like blocked fallopian tubes, if you can't unblock them, you have to do IVF, so you don't want to be wasting 2 years not knowing that.
Exactly. Right. Okay. Anything else that people should be sort of thinking about or knowing about if they're on this?
Look, I'm also really big on drinking water and being hydrated. Which again is something that a lot of people don't do, particularly in winter. But even in Queensland in the heat, you get people who only have maybe 1 cup of water a day and then 3 coffees. Right. So that's obviously not good for your health. So I say at least 8 glasses of water. Though you can go online and put your weight in, and it actually will tell you how many litres of water you should be having based on your weight, because that's actually the correct dosage of water you should have a day. And you can have things like soda water, you can add lemon juice to your water, you can have herbal teas. It just can't be caffeinated or sugared, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important fact.
Milky drinks, like I guess those choc milks and that are sugary.
Yeah, they're full of sugar.
Yeah. So those things are out. Yeah.
And no aspartame, so no diet drinks or
right,
anything like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so try to drink as much water as you can that you need. I mean, I guess the other thing in Chinese medicine is we'd say we don't suggest drinking too much water. Like, we don't suggest drinking, right, to just flush everything out in a general sense. I usually tell my patients, if you weren't urinating at night and you start drinking a lot of water and then you are urinating at night, you're probably now drinking too much water. For the people that, go on these, they come into the clinic with a giant water bottle and they're just chugging it down. But also your Chinese medicine practitioner will be able to use that as part of the diagnosis. So if you're sweating a lot and you're drinking a lot, that can be part of your pattern of disharmony.
Yeah.
And or your GP might do some tests to work out what's wrong there. Because that can be an indication if you're so thirsty and you have to drink a lot of water. That can be part of your pathology as well.
Yeah. And I often find in the case of someone who's drinking so much but still so thirsty, it's actually an electrolyte imbalance.
Okay.
So I often find if you just use an electrolyte drink for a couple of weeks, that usually sorts the problem out. But yes, you're right, it could be a kidney problem, it could be other things
diabetes,
as well.
Stuff like that. Yeah, undiagnosed diabetes, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
good. Okay, so this is going to help people with their general health just as much as their journey to having a baby. Yeah, so these are all really great physical tips. Are there any other sort of things that people should be thinking about or they could do in this fertility journey?
Yeah, so the one thing I really notice about patients who've been on a long fertility journey in particular, there might have been quite a lot of IVF that's not been successful in that as well, is the way they talk. I think the way they talk is a really indicative of the mental chatter they're giving to their body. So we often, in the IVF world, the word failed is just used continuously. And so you get people coming in here saying, my cycle failed, my eggs failed, everything's failed. And it's just such a sad story. And you're thinking, your body's just learning. It's being trained by your brain to fail, essentially. I'm not blaming them at all.
No, but I just realised that too because I fear that a lot. Oh, I failed IVF cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, so it's a very negative kind of connotation to the whole experience. So I like to tell people we need to speak differently about that. So it wasn't successful versus it was a failure. And also the belief that you can. Like, I can understand after, your 7th, 8th, 9th cycle of IVF, it feels like this is not possible. But it's really important to try and keep that mental health around this experience as much as possible. And I don't mean every single day you should be thinking, this is fine, it's fine. It's literally allowing yourself to think, this is so crap, I can't believe I'm going through this. But then the next day waking up and going, this will work. And having that real ability to retrain your body to believe this can happen is so important. And just, the thought process around it is really important, I think.
Yeah, that's great. And what sort of things do you give to people that might be in that place of maybe they are feeling a bit flat and depressed, or they don't know, they're a bit anxious, they've had enough? Yeah,
look, meditation, there's some really good meditation apps out there. And I say to people, even if you don't have time to meditate, put it on when you go to sleep. There's some really good positive subliminal reinforcement going through those apps. And the other thing I say to people is get outside, go for a walk, do something fun. Don't make fertility because it can be such a chore by the end, It's
a job to do. It becomes like, I've got to go home and fuck my husband. I mean, sorry, I'll probably edit that. That'll be a good point. Yeah, so it just becomes a chore to do. Like, it's like, I've got to go home and have sex, and it's like, it's so rigid, isn't it? And it's like, I've seen some people that are beep 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 beep, and they're like, I gotta call my partner to go home, and like it's no, there's
it
no
becomes
romance
very
in that.
mechanical, and it becomes very unpleasant. And even the IVF cycle, you have a transfer, and then for the next 2 weeks, you're literally just so tense thinking about what could happen, and you don't have any fun because, oh my God, that could ruin the chance of the transfer working. And I'm like saying to people, as long as you're not taking drugs or bungee jumping or drinking lots of alcohol, there's probably not a whole lot you could do to ruin the chances of that transfer not working. So, and it's just all about really believing it can work is really important.
So positive affirmation, thinking positively, reframing your thinking, catching yourself in any of that negative thinking, or that just thinking that has been around you, And I think because sometimes this can be a really isolating thing for people too, because they don't want to tell everybody that they're going through the situation they're going through. And a lot of people deal with grief and loss in a very private way because they don't tell people they had a they had a miscarriage, let's say, they had a partially successful transfer or something, and then didn't take or whatever. And that I think that people have to allow space to grieve, and they don't. They just move on, next cycle, next thing.
Yeah, that's right. And one book that I say to people they should read, which some people love and some people don't love, but I think is great, is Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Life. I feel like that's a really good one for people to learn how they're almost self-sabotaging without realising it, and how to bring themselves back into a more positive state mentally. Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, awesome. It's a bit old school, some of it, but I've
heard of that book.
It's awesome. It's really good.
It's good. Yeah. I often give people Martin Seligman's Positive Psychology. Do you know that?
No, they're probably fairly similar though.
The thing that you can use this for is if you feel really, really depressed, like you've just got nothing left in the tank, and you're just like, and so I'll put the link below for that, but you can basically go online and do a test that helps you work out your strengths, and so it's based on your strengths. So it works out. You do this test, and it's not optimal to do the test when you are depressed, but let's say you are and you do the test, you still get some result from it. But if you do the test when you're in a good place, you kind of know about yourself, you know who you are, and you know what your strengths are. And so let's say one of your strengths might be appreciation of beauty, let's say. And what he recommends is, like, when you're in that place of really depression, so this is really good for people, like, let's say they are waiting that 2 weeks to know, and they're just like, some people even take time off work, and they're just sitting around at home, wondering for 2 weeks or a week or whatever, like hoping that will make it. I don't know. I just think there's so much time that's there's nothing to occupy the time. So what they do is they pick one thing every day, one new way to use that strength that they normally wouldn't. So if it was like appreciation of beauty, go out to find a garden, go to your garden, go somewhere and find 5 beautiful things and just notice, that's a beautiful flower, that's lovely. Or go to an art gallery, appreciate that. If appreciation of beauty isn't one of your strengths, you'd be like, oh, that's horrible, Marie, I don't want to do that. I wouldn't find that good. If it's creativity, it might be like making a recipe making a cake with no recipe or something like that. Like, that's a creative thing, a way you could use your creativity that you haven't done before, and you really feel like, oh yeah, I'd love to do that. So I think that's awesome because it's very personal to people's individual strengths, and it helps them kind of just as a psychological thing that helps you understand yourself and helps you deal with your mental health really well. So and anything else, like, I mean, you could go and see a psychologist, you could see a counsellor, you could get some support that way, right? Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good point that you make, and that is something that I do encourage people to do, is to not stop working. I mean, everyone's different, everyone handles things differently, but I do find women who actually literally stop working to then do IVF, that it's a much harder process. There's no distraction, there's no kind of normality to their life, and every little part of the step, which there's so many steps, you're constantly focusing on. It's
so generally,
all consuming, right? The whole thing is consuming you.
Yeah, that's correct. So I feel like definitely on transfer day, you should have the day off. Other than that, try and keep life as normal as possible.
That's good advice. And I think in a Chinese medicine sense, that helps in terms of keeping the flow. Because we're all about the qi and the flow, and keeping the flow moving. And if you take 2 weeks off, you end up with mental stagnation, physical stagnation often, because I've seen some women that say, oh no, I won't. They won't even go for a walk around the block because they're worried
that could fall out.
Something happening. And and then you have to think, if you were to get pregnant naturally, you wouldn't know. No, you'd be doing all kinds of things without knowing. You wouldn't. And someone said their fertility specialist likened the chance of it falling out of you was like putting a grain of rice in butter. It's like, it's just, it can't fall out. So I thought that was quite a good analogy. That's really good advice. So I think this has been awesome and really good for people to kind of know a different perspective, and also because you've had so much experience, not just like in a mechanical sense of treating, but also just dealing with all these different people and all these different personalities, and helping people manage that journey, because it is sometimes it's successful, sometimes it's not. And dealing with those ups and downs, it's great that you've you've started, you've been in practice a long time to kind of be doing that kind of thing.
And it's really interesting. At the end of the day, we're all kind of in the same place when you're going through a fertility journey, and so it's kind of always good to know that you're not alone as well, and that, you know, I can say, oh, well, there's this patient who did this and that worked well for them, and, you know, all those different perspectives.
Yeah, great. Okay, so thank you so much for being here and giving up your time and doing this, making time to do it. And so if you want to follow up, find out more about what Camilla does in her practice, you can click on the link below, and we're in Paddington right now.
Yes, Paddington, Queensland.
All over Queensland. So just think Paddington Bear, but not in the UK. So Paddington, Queensland, and her clinic here is lovely. It's like it is a day spa pretty much, isn't it? It's a beautiful environment. It's very relaxing. I'm very relaxed just sitting in this room doing this. So you can do that. You can click onto her blog and follow, you know, to get more information and more stuff. And if you've got a question about fertility or Chinese medicine, you can pop that in the comments below, and I'll attempt to answer that for you. I love hearing people's comments on the channel here. And so if you haven't subscribed already yet, and you've watched this or listened to this and you think, hey, this is really good stuff, I love this, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because we love subscribers, and click that notification bell there, and then you'll never miss an episode when we put new episodes up. If you've got a question that you'd like us to make another video about, or you'd like me to make another video about, I'll see if Camilla can answer your question, then put that below. And I look forward to seeing you again on the next video soon. Thanks for listening to the Chinese Medicine Podcast. Did you know we're also on TikTok? And you can find shorter videos on Facebook and Instagram that you might like to share with your friends and family. You can also find our podcast on Apple, Spotify, and all places where you listen to audio podcasts. I look forward to seeing you again on the next video soon.
Body adjusts when you tell it gently what to do.
Okay, yep, sorry about that. It's weird. The ghost thing.